it was a lot of just like pretending I was okay to people when I was really suffering, like an invisible injury. It's very difficult to sort of say to people, like, I'm really struggling mentally because of my knee. I'd say a lot of women struggle with body image. Sitting around a swimming pool with like all my friendship group on holiday and just being like, why am I the only one that sat there with this like big, uncomfortable belly? And I don't know what's going on. And I didn't have any answers. And ultra processed food is just like a classification of food. An easy way of understanding it is a food that if you look at the label has lots of ingredients you probably wouldn't have in your kitchen. So I'm Annie. I live in the south of England. I work in the fitness industry. I run a female focused fitness coaching business that's very much based around workouts and nutrition with a huge focus around gut health, which is something that I'm super passionate about.
I feel like those two words, right, gut health, over the past sort of 5 years have kind of become like buzzwords. How
So, yeah, such
it's
buzzwords.
so true, isn't it? Like how did those two words first come across your desk? Like why did you start looking into gut health?
Okay, so as a 15-year-old, and I'm 30 now, so a long time ago, this is not something that's a recent thing for me, but it's something that I've recently managed to heal. So I used to suffer with really awful gut health issues, like predominantly bloating focused from the age of 15. I could never figure it out. I went through a whole, not eating gluten, not eating dairy, had a really restrictive diet. Nothing helped. I went through an injury. And when I came out the other side of the injury, I thought, "Well, the only thing that I really haven't healed is my gut health." And I just went through a whole, like, let's read the science and tried a whole host of new things. Read a book that quite a lot of people will probably have read, one of the Tim Spector books, and have managed to heal it myself. And I now talk a lot about it online because I was someone that thought that my gut health issues were genetic. I've got a lot of people with celiac disease, had a few members of my family with bowel cancer, and I really thought that was just me. And yeah, I've been through this whole healing process, and I'm here today with very few gut health symptoms. I like to try and educate people from the perspective of someone who's gone through it themselves online, kind of through my social media.
I know it's really difficult to sum up some of those changes that you made.
Mm.
Obviously, we could probably do a full episode on just that, like probably multiple episodes. But were there were there certain things that you could kind of give us that would basically kind of sum it up a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So the thing that I started doing was reducing the ultra processed foods in my diet. And a lot of people confuse ultra processed with processed foods. A processed food is just anything that's gone through a process, like tomatoes going into a tin, for example. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an unhealthy food. An ultra processed food is just like a classification of food, but a good, an easy way of understanding it is uh, a food that if you look at the label has lots of ingredients you probably wouldn't have in your kitchen. That's not exactly how you define it, but it's kind of an easy way of thinking about it. And I had quite a lot of those in my diet that I hadn't realized were ultra processed. So lots of things that are actually advertised as healthy. So we're talking like a wholemeal tortilla wrap from the supermarket, for example. If you read the ingredients, you'd be shocked at how many ingredients we don't need in our diet are in those sorts of products. And they're advertised with like lettuce and chicken coming out of it as if it's a really healthy lunch that you can have. Had lots of those in my diet, which I reduced, but I was also consuming lots of like low calorie foods that again I thought low calorie equals healthy or high protein equals healthy, which is absolutely not the case. So things like white monsters for energy, the zero sugar white monsters, which I know so many athletes, especially in like the bodybuilding space, really drink a lot of. Things like Coke Zero, I was having one of those like pretty much every single day, but also things like flavored low calorie yogurts, all those sorts of products, protein drinks, those kind of things. So I started by reducing those and it made such a big difference. So that was the first step. So I then moved on to diversifying the plants. I was someone who'd go to the supermarket every week and it would be like broccoli, tomatoes, onions, peppers, and I wouldn't really stray too far from that. I think a lot of people are in that boat. And I switched up plants that I was eating. I would try new ones. Yeah, just challenge myself to add a new one into my shopping basket every week, which I can go into a lot more detail on. But the last thing that I did was to introduce more fermented foods that have those live active properties, basically. So live active bacteria, which can add good bacteria into the gut, put simply. And the combination of those three things just completely transform my body.
Going back to the ultra processed thing to start with, like, did it shock you when you kind of started reading those labels and starting to
In a
realize, like,
huge
"Oh
way.
my god, like, this is mad."
It completely. And I think it just goes to show how scary marketing is, because there are so many products that are marketed as healthy things. So, for example, like protein bars, there's some, I won't name names, but some really, really popular ones that you see people just grabbing and they're like, oh, I'll get a bit of protein in after my workout. And they're some of the most unhealthy things you can consume. But yeah, they're marketed as these like healthy way, snack on the go sort of things. It is really quite shocking, yeah.
How does that make you feel now though? Because, like, obviously you've genuinely changed your life and your
Mm,
health and you're,
mm,
like, you're so much, I would imagine, happier, more fulfilled in the rest of your life because you're feeling healthy in kind of that part of your life. To see that marketability and to see products and things like that push that are actually not great,
mm.
that must feel quite difficult. It's not a very nice feeling to
I
kinda
w
understand it, right?
No, exactly. I think it's quite horrifying when you know all the details. Just as an example, I actually got sent, in PR, a whole box of supplements, that's from this huge influencer that's recently released these supplements, and the ingredients in them are absolutely terrible, and there's one that's actually marketed as a gut health tonic, and, like, maltodextrin is, like, one of the first ingredients in there. I think when you know how to read ingredients labels, you just yeah, you hold a lot more power. But yeah, it is really quite scary, and it's a shame because it means that if you're lacking knowledge, just because I mean, I spent hours and hours reading things, that's the only reason why I'm kind of, in the know. If you're lacking that knowledge, it's just so confusing. It really is, and that's why I'm working with so many women, I guess, on making the changes themselves now, because yeah, it's a scary world.
And for you, it's never ending as well. It must almost feel like a rabbit hole at times when you're reading a study or you're reading another book. It
Mm.
must just continually be like, there's a next thing, there's a next thing, there's a next thing. Like, you're never finished learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What I will say is when you know, it feels like you know, and then it becomes a lot easier. I now find eating totally seamless. I don't find it a difficult thing knowing what's good for me and what's not good for me. But I think just having the basic knowledge there is really important. And that's just, I guess, what I'm trying to do is just help other people who aren't necessarily, doctors, nutritionists, dietitians, which I'm not, just learn the basics. So they're also informed and, they can go to the supermarket and fill their shopping basket with healthy things without all the confusion.
Let's talk about that shopping basket because you said about adding that new thing every week. And I think sometimes people are guilty, and I've certainly been guilty of this in the past, of just going back to the things that they know because it's easy, because people's
Yeah.
lives are busy and you don't have time to think. You're just like, I know that works. I'm just going to go
Yeah.
with that. Like, how did you go about like diversifying your plate, diversifying your kind of range of foods when, you are busy, you have got a super busy lifestyle. It's a difficult
Mhm.
thing to do.
So I've come up with a bit of a strategy, and it mainly applies to my lunches. And it might sound really, really simple or quite strange to someone, but I believe that one of the reasons we're restricted with the type of plants, and when I'm referring to plants, I'm talking about not just like vegetables and fruits. All plants come into that. So nuts, herbs, seeds, spices, grains, legumes, all those kind of things come under that in that category. If we are restricted to making, for example, a curry, we're not going to be throwing in like random things in there, because you try and think of what plants go well in that dish. So there's nothing, do you understand what I mean there?
Yeah,
So if you make
yeah,
a
no,
curry, you're not going to be throwing like iceberg lettuce in there, are you? You're going to be
I got
thinking of like of the things that go in a curry. Nothing wrong with having a curry. I eat curry every week. But the same with like a pasta dish. You're not going to be throwing in well, you're not often going to be throwing in, let's say, like almonds, for example. You're going to think about like what goes into that pasta dish. And now thinking there are probably loads of really good almond based pasta dishes. But what I developed was a bit of a strategy for myself, and that's by making nourish bowls, is what I call them,
okay.
every day for my lunch. And I've kind of become slightly known for them on social media. And essentially, it's a very simple collection are really tasty plants. I pair it with a protein source, and a really nice dressing. And it means you can mix them up all the time without being worried as to whether they go in that meal. Let's think about it like a salad, but a much hot. I think salads have a bad rep because people think like lettuce, cucumber, and tomatoes. And I'm talking like hearty, like butternut squash, sweet potato. There might be nuts, seeds in there. I don't know, chicken, salmon, healthy fats, like all that kind of stuff in a bowl with a really delicious dressing that's also super gut friendly. And it just really, really helps you to just look at your fridge and think, right, what can I just take from my fridge and put on my plate today, rather than thinking like, oh, does broccoli go in that sandwich? But I think it's important to understand the why behind, well, yeah, why you diversifying the plants in your diet. And it's because you need the range of plants to feed all the good bacteria in your gut, essentially. So the wider the, well, yeah, the more diverse the range of plants you're eating, the more of those like good microbes you're kind of keeping healthy in your gut.
It's you say like it's a simple thing, and it is a simple thing, but I think sometimes simplicity is the best way of looking at stuff like this
Mm.
because, like what we've already talked about, like there's so much research and there's so many studies and papers that you could get into, but actually,
Yeah.
the day-to-day person isn't going to do that. They
No.
need simplicity, don't they? They need like,
Mhm.
look, here's a simple strategy that you can put in place that is going to help, and by kind of putting that message across on social media, but also with your clients as well, that is going to help them do kind of what you did without having to have the knowledge base that you've built up to be able to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think if you have a bit of a method, it's really, really helpful. And this is what I try and pass on to my clients. But when I think about lunch, because this is, I think, predominantly where people are more open to eating a whole load of things. Often for dinner, people think more comfort food. Do you feel? So when it comes to lunch, if you're thinking, right, if I'm visualizing my plate of food, where's my protein? And obviously, depending on what kind of exercise you do, if you're the average person and you, I don't know, you do two not very intense workouts a week and some steps during the day, you're probably not going to need tons of protein. I do a lot of exercise, so I need a really good amount of protein. You can see that on your plate. Where are my carbs coming from? Have I got some healthy fats? Have I got some like live fermented foods in there? To me, that's tick, tick, tick. And naturally, that plate of food will come with a hell of a lot of fiber because we're eating a hell of a lot of plants.
Mm. I think it's so interesting as well, the adaptive nature of the body, because like we spoke about when you were younger and you were having loads of gut issues and you were
Yeah.
thinking, is it this, is it that, is it the other thing? And it's not until kind of you changed your habits that kind of your gut
Mm.
health improved and you weren't having those issues anymore. Like that is just the body adapting to what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
What you're putting in your
totally.
body. It's the same as when we talk about training, when you're like the adaptive nature of training. Like if you continually train and if you progressively overload your body, you will get fitter. It's like
Yeah.
using that same sort of approach with eating and with that everyday habit that you just need to build to get to a better place.
It's exactly that's actually a really good way of looking at it. Like the body takes time to adapt, but I think the key element here is that it takes time to achieve that, because a lot of people are looking for quick fixes, which is why the supplements market is so huge, because people will be like, "Oh, a greens powder that might help my gut health. I'll just eat exactly the same, but add in a scoop of greens powder." as if that's going to make the difference. That's what I mean when I say marketing is so scary. But it takes time, and you need to make the changes. Just as you do with exercise, building strength, endurance with running, all those kind of things. Um, but if you stick at it for a long period of time, you will make the changes. But for me, my own journey, I was trying to essentially, I put it as rebuild my gut microbiome, which isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And people get really impatient, and then they're like, I'll purchase that and see if that'll do the job.
That 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 is true though with those quick fixes as well, because most people
Mm.
are purchasing a, let's say, generic greens powder and using it once or twice and
Yeah.
thinking, "Oh, that's gonna help me." But, like,
Yeah.
it's that short-term gratification that just kind of doesn't work. And I think when
No,
you when
exactly.
you when you change your habits, your daily habits, and you stick to the changes in those daily habits, it's like when people talk about discipline over motivation, it's like I
Yeah.
think you can apply that to everything. It's not just like sport, it's like
Mm.
work, family, relationships, your gut health as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it applies to everything, but you just, as long as you're staying consistent with the right things, you will get the results. I really believe.
If you stray away from kind of like where you are now, because I'm sure there are situations where, things come up, or like you've got a really busy social calendar, or like it just becomes difficult to be on the trajectory that you like to be on.
Mm.
How do you kind of reset yourself? Or do you go
So
away from it at all?
yeah, I do. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I took my sister for a brunch for her birthday yesterday in Richmond, and we had like, delicious pancakes and hash browns and everything. It's actually, I regularly stray away from it. I'm not someone who eats a restricted diet. My friends would not say when we're out I eat any differently from them.
Yeah.
Um, I don't necessarily even choose the healthy option when we're out. I'll order pizza at a pizza restaurant kind of thing. You're not going to get me eating a salad at Pizza Express. Um, it's just about having 80 to 90% of your diet, where you're fueling yourself with the right things, and then the extra bit you don't need to worry too much about. The beauty of where I'm at now is that I've built my diet up to the extent that it works so well with my lifestyle that I'll come back from a holiday, and that's when people tend to go into like restricted mode. I've been bad, let's be good now and eat all those things. And I really hate that way of framing things. I just go back to eating what I eat normally, and within a few days it's like I feel great again. So no, I do stray away from it regularly every week. But if you don't have that all or nothing mindset where you feel like I've been off track, so what's the point? I've ruined all my progress. If you can get rid of that, and work on that psychological side, which is huge, then you know, yeah, it makes a huge difference.
And that's so tough, and so many people have done that, and I think I can speak from experience, and I'm sure you've done it as well, where,
Mm.
yeah, you do stray away from, again, anything in your life, not just eating or diet, or it could be, like I say, friendships or sport or whatever, and
Yeah.
you're just like, "Oh, there's no point, I'm just gonna lob a grenade at it." And you're like, "No,
Yeah.
whoa, like, you don't need to do that, just kind of get back to that point where you were."
Yeah, absolutely. I actually heard someone frame it really well the other day, and if you were to spill a bit of water on yourself, you're not going to be like, no, I might as well spill the whole glass now. And I thought that was a really good way of looking at it. So simple, but I was like, so true. So true.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that analogy. Although at the moment, with it being so warm in the UK, I think
Yeah, I'd
chuck
happily do that.
chuck that glass of water over yourself.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of like how you've been feeling on a like day-to-day basis and how your body has changed and things like that, that's obvious to hear and obvious to kind of relate to. But in terms of like performance and stuff in the athletic endeavors that you kind of partake in,
Mm.
how has this change in diet affected that side of things?
So it's interesting. When I made these changes to my diet, all I was thinking about is bloating, because that's the thing that was so huge for me. I had like chronic, it was after everything I ate sort of thing. I post a lot of these pictures on my Instagram, which I never thought I'd do. It's funny because I took all these photos to send to like my boyfriend or like my sister or whatever. I've now ended up just oversharing everything. And I would literally look like 6 months pregnant after nearly every meal. I made the changes to try and combat the bloating, but the other changes I experienced alongside I were totally unexpected for me. So things like my hair being thicker, my nails being stronger, my skin being much better. One thing I really used to struggle with is immune system, so that I just anyone with a cold around me, I just get ill. Um, Not sleeping as well, but also then I'm so much more energized now. So I just feel like I have a constant stream of energy up until about 11 p.m. at night where I'm like, okay, right, it's time to go to bed.
Everyone's like, Ali,
So
chill, chill.
I know, literally. So I would say that that change has been huge. And I know we touched on before when we were chatting before the podcast, but I've just started competing again at a quite high level with squash, and that's huge. But the other thing is, as someone who's worked in actually in the fitness industry for years and knows the importance of protein, I'd never really focused on it in my own diet. I would tell other people to eat it. And I was so carb focused when it came to my own diet. And I'm just going to preface this by saying I'm not demonizing carbs because I also eat a lot of those, but I never really focused on it. And when you are trying to build up some serious strength and recover quickly from your sessions and build up muscle mass, protein is absolutely essential. So because I started focusing on all the elements of my diet, not just the gut health side, because you don't need tons of protein to assist your gut, you need enough. So it does have an impact, but for performance I needed the protein. So adding that into my diet and just being really consistent with that, I've seen huge changes in my workouts, whether that be strength training, whether that be running, whether that be squash performance.
Why is it so hard to implement the knowledge that you know? Now let me explain that a little bit more. Like you just said there, and it's something I can relate so much to, like the protein element of things, to tell people like you need to be doing this, like you need to be eating X amount per grams of body weight or whatever the calculation is for that specific person.
Mm.
It's so easy to say it, but then to actually implement that yourself is
I know.
so hard. And you're like, I know this knowledge. Why am I not doing it?
And I think it's just because we're looking for quick fixes, and it's almost like we don't believe that it's actually going to help. And I don't know why, because it's as long as you're making a change that there's, good amount of science to back it up. It will work, but you just need to do it for a few months. It's not a case of doing it for a week and being like, oh, I haven't seen the changes. Like, let's give up on that. And the changes will come if you're able to stay consistent, but consistency is the key word, and that's the bit we struggle with because we're so we're so obsessed as a society with like quick fixes, that we think that that's the way it's going to work.
I often wonder why. And I don't know if it's worse now because like we get that short-term gratification on like social and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah,
is that making kind of the mindset towards everything else worse, do you think?
I think so. Yes. I think it makes sense, the fact that we're all struggling with like even like concentration span, and this is me as well. And it's like we're looking for that next thing constantly rather than just sticking to the basics and being like, that's going to work. And like when I tell people, I often have clients come on board and they're like, well, give me a list of supplements that I need to buy. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm going to tell you to buy any supplements, to be honest. I mean, we have a nutritionist on the platform, Ellie, who's my coaching platform, who's amazing, and she will recommend specific things. Like she loves magnesium, for example. But I'm telling you, you're never going to find me recommending a greens powder as something that's essential. We need to be eating on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's like it's just one of those things when you start thinking about things like attention span and like short-term wins and fixes that you kind of your brain kind of spirals down to, oh, is it because of this or is it because of that or is it? And I think we're probably
Mm,
inherently built to want those short-term fixes anyway.
yeah.
But it's kind of like why I like doing this because um, there's so much information out there that you can read and it be incredibly quick to see and digest, and then you make an informed opinion on that very short piece of content, whether it be something you read or videos that you watch. Whereas when you do start, you have like a long form conversation, or you listen to lots of podcasts, or you read books, it's that like I've actually got some time to actually think about how I feel about this, rather
Yeah.
than just making a kind of snapshot judgment on that short piece of content in whatever facet it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you can get to grips with a few things you want to implement and just be consistent with them and block out the noise of social media and quick fixes, you'll be onto a winner.
When you were, when you were younger and you were taking photos of like the bloating and things like that, and like you said, sending it to your boyfriend and your sister, and it kind of being, I'm not going to say like a joke, but being like, oh my God, what is happening here?
Yeah.
Was was it like, how did you process that in your head? Was it like, oh, this is just me? Is it, oh, this is scary? Or is it like, is it something else?
It wasn't no, I don't know if I necessarily found it scary. Um, I found it frustrating because
Okay.
things that wouldn't necessarily sound like a huge deal to lots of people or a huge deal to me were things like having to pre-plan outfits if I was on holiday to make sure I had baggy clothes that I could put on, being really uncomfortable in a swimsuit around girls. And I think girls struggle a lot, well, women struggle a lot with body image. I mean, not just women, men as well, but I'd say a lot of women struggle with body image. And sitting around a swimming pool with like all my friendship group on holiday and just being like, why am I the only one that sat there with this like big, uncomfortable belly? And I don't know what's going on. And I didn't have any answers. I think the thing that I found really frustrating is the lack of knowledge on the medical side about gut health, which is so I just find so bizarre. I don't know, maybe it's not taught at medical school. I know they don't know too much about nutrition. But like 70% of our immune systems in our gut, it produces, I think it's 90% of our serotonin. And it's not spoken about when you go to the doctors. It's just so confusing. And they'll prescribe some like medication for it and never tell you that you need to make diet changes, which I now find absolutely bizarre. But the amount of times I'd gone through my GP testing, did all these things, and I'd never ever have been told to make changes to my diet apart from trying out a low FODMAP diet, which is a very temporary thing to try and figure out if there's anything that's going to kind of uh, any like real bad irritants. So I found it really frustrating. I think I didn't find it scary necessarily. I just sort of thought, this is me and I'm probably never going to be able to change this. And to be honest, the only reason I thought, let's give it another shot was like I said, I was coming out the other end of an injury and I thought, I'm feeling mentally like really good. I've had 3 years like feeling what I now know is that I was probably depressed. And I thought the only thing I really, really don't understand are these gut health issues. So that was my, I guess, yeah, reason for making the changes.
There has been sort of connection, isn't there, as well, between like gut health and mental health.
Oh, huge connection. Yeah,
Do you think
huge connection.
do you think that's one of the reasons that maybe you were going through that difficult period?
No, I don't think necessarily. I think the difficult period it possibly contributed to it. I guess I'll never know. I mean, there was a lot that was out of whack with me in general, but no, the difficult period I would say was totally sparked by going through this injury because
Okay.
all my passions that squash, as we were talking about earlier, related to me being physically able, as well as working in the fitness industry and suddenly not being able to walk without pain and not being able to figure it out for what was actually over 3 years by the time I fully came out of it, but say 3 years of like real bad times. It was just really, really difficult. I was like rethinking my career. It was a lot of just like pretending I was okay to people when I was really suffering. And it's actually very difficult to like an invisible injury. It's very difficult to sort of say to people like I'm really struggling mentally because of my knee. It doesn't sound right. You think, oh, I'm struggling mentally because I've we've had a death in the family or something. You don't think of injury as something that's going to spark mental health issues, but it really did in a huge way for me. I really, really struggled with it, but very potentially the gut health issues hadn't helped.
I think as well, it's when you say you almost feel a bit, I don't know, like embarrassed to say to somebody like, "Oh, what's up? Oh, my knee." They're like, "Well, your knee will get better." You're like, Well,
Mm.
yes, but like, there's so much that has to go into it, and like maybe it won't get better, and then that takes you down another kind of rabbit hole of spiraling, and then it's like, but my whole for you, like not just competitive athletic life, but career is built
Yeah,
around the passion of, movement in essence.
yeah.
Um, and then you start doubting everything there. So it's very obvious to kind of understand why that would have led you to a point of depression. Um, just talk us through, I guess, for people that don't know what the injury was, how it happened, and where you're at with it now.
Yeah, so I can't quite figure out how it happened, but the first time I felt it was in the gym. I was doing a leg session, and later that day, I had a squash match in the evening. I just kind of been brought in to play for a ladies' team at a club in Wimbledon, and I felt it before the match, but during the match, I was like, "Okay, something's really not right." It wasn't a something's gone situation, like when you tear your hamstring or your Achilles or whatever. I knew it was bad. I really struggled to drive home in the evening. I was living in London at the time, and I went straight to my physio, who was amazing, but I was actually misdiagnosed. So they thought it was something with my meniscus, and then we went into lockdown. So I was basically doing rehab for that, and it wasn't that. But obviously, as much as physios can do, you know, can try as hard as they can. They can't see inside your knee, so sometimes they are going to get it wrong. And obviously, my symptoms must have matched up to that. And I rehabbed it incorrectly throughout the whole lockdown. I then had a scan at the end of lockdown, and it was inflammation of my Hoffer's pad, which is like a fat pad that sits underneath your kneecap. I'm yet to come across someone who knows what I'm talking about. I don't know if you do.
No
I've
idea.
still never come across someone who said I've also suffered with that. And we then rehabbed it. So that's the same physio, and they were amazing. And I think we probably went through almost a year of rehab, but sadly, it just wasn't getting any better. And then I was already on the waiting list to have an operation. And then I eventually had a partial removal of my Hoffer's pad. So they went in through keyhole surgery, took out the bit that had sort of wrapped itself around a tendon because it had no space to go. And from there, I just went completely downhill. So you think an operation is going to make you better, but because we were in COVID times, there was literally no aftercare. And I didn't know what I was meant to be doing. And the problem had been that I think by the point of it getting really bad, I had been walking with a limp and in a very strange way for about a year and a half. So I'd then had a whole host of other issues. My body just wasn't moving in the way that it should be. And I think that enhanced things. I don't know. I went through a ton of different experts in the UK, in London, specialists in Hoffer syndrome, all these kind of things. And eventually, me and my boyfriend Elliot moved to Amsterdam for a little bit, came across physio there. Uh, After I'd had a total breakdown at night, Elliot just booked me into this random physio that was close to where we were renting. And he just managed to sort my whole life out for me. And I'm still very good friends with him to this day. He's called Mark. Um, and he was absolutely incredible. Just had a completely different approach, looked at my body and thought, okay, it's not actually the knee. The joint looks really pretty healthy post this surgery. Everything else is absolutely not functioning well. It's like, for example, to touch my calf would leave me in like really intense pain. And just so many things not working well. So I dry needling, massage. I think I had a couple of weeks before we were even really doing any exercise where I was just like on the massage bed at the physio. And then eventually we just added in more and more and more. And to be honest, it's been a relatively seamless process since then. But from the day we started working together, I don't think I ran for months after that still. So it was such a gradual process. It took a long time. But yeah, I'm really happy to say that I'm totally back to everything's normal and healthy and not struggling with any kind of injuries now, which is amazing.
In that moment when it was difficult, and let's go to that moment in Amsterdam where you broke down with your boyfriend. Did you think it was done? Did you think like, I'm not going to be able to train or run or play squash ever again?
Yeah, completely. I'd actually had a situation with one of Elliot's friends the week before we went, and he'd said, um, "Oh, like you're probably never going to be able to ski again, but don't worry, I can't either." And I thought, "Oh, that's such a like a first world problem, right? Not being able to ski again." But I really like skiing, and I was like, "I am not ready to accept that I can't do that." And to me, that wasn't just skiing. I was thinking like running, squash, like, will I ever be able to walk? Am I just accepting that this is my fate? And it really got me. But the reason I was really struggling actually in Amsterdam that first week we moved there is because if you know the house situation in Amsterdam, they're all these really tall houses that are super old with no lifts in them. And we were on the top floor, and every day it was a huge, huge struggle just for me to get up to our living space. And I was just, yeah, suffering a lot. I couldn't ride a bike. So that was another thing. We'd moved to the city, and I was like, I can't get on a bike. And that's like the thing to do there. And I just thought, this is it for me. I don't know. I'm never going to be able to do this again. And I was really struggling with my identity. I just didn't
Yeah.
know without all those things. I mean, let alone being able to walk properly, without squash, which had made up such a huge part of my childhood and like um teens, like early 20s. I was like, who am I? I don't know. I work in the fitness industry, but I can't walk properly. And I was trying to diversify to posting like recipe videos, but my heart wasn't really in it. And I didn't really know what to do.
Identity is so it's such a complicated topic as well, because like, you pour yourself into one specific part of your
Mhm.
life 100%, and then if that
Yeah.
thing is taken away, even though at the time it's felt like the right thing to have done, it's like, oh my god, like, I don't know who I am now.
Yeah.
And when and that can be, people get it with work, right? With redundancy, with injuries, with if they're like a runner or they consider themselves like one thing, they kind of pigeonhole themselves into something. It's just so tricky to then understand, like, who am I without that thing? And
Yeah.
it sounds like kind of like you were in that point of that position.
It's really important, I think, to have different areas of your life that fulfill you for different
Yeah.
reasons. Because if you're, yeah, if you're all in on one thing and then that thing doesn't work out, it's really, yeah, it's really quite tricky.
And I guess as well with like with a knee, right? And people that don't know and have never played squash, I guess there's so much compression that goes through your
Yeah.
ankles and your knee joints when you're planting your foot and things like that, or if you're changing direction quickly. Even when things started to get better and you started to kind of move forward with the injury, did you still feel like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to play squash again? Was that still a thought in your head? Do you remember the first time that you thought, oh my God, I actually might be able to do this again?
Mhm. Well, for context, I think I've been sort of healed for it's over 2 years now. I
Yeah.
can't timeline wise. I don't know if that's quite right, but around that time. And I've only started playing properly again this year. So what we're halfway through this year, about 6 months. So it's taken a long time, even from the point of being okay, to be like I can participate in a squash match. I mean, squash is it's like labeled as like the hardest racket sport you can do in terms of intensity um and things. And yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. I know you said that you've played it before, but it's just basically like running like a lunatic around a box and with your opponent, try not to get hit by a ball or a racket. And it's really intense on the joints. It's not a great one if you're injured. So it's just been super important to me to bolster that with a lot of strength work. I wouldn't be doing running and squash, anything like cardio based, without doing a lot of strength work now. To me, I just see it as like rehabilitation.
Yeah.
I'm doing everything I can to make sure I don't get injured again.
I don't know if I've ever heard that word, prehabilitation. I will say about squash as well. I've never sweated so much in my life.
Oh, I know.
Like, it
It's
is
a crazy sport.
absolutely brutal.
It is.
Um,
It is.
yeah, and it's such a good sport, and, like, I remember growing up, I grew up in a little place in South Wales, and the leisure centre had 2 squash courts, and that's the only reason I ever really played, because I said to you, my dad played, and it was the
Yeah.
last thing he could properly beat me at, and so I just continued to play, so basically he could continue to beat me, I think.
Yeah.
But I think so many people will have seen squash courts over the years, like, growing up, particularly for people our age. We're pretty much the same age, I think, and, um, they will have seen these courts in a leisure centre, but often never have explored it or never played, and I would say, like,
Yeah.
it's a really cool sport.
It's a really cool sport. It's a shame that more people haven't tried it. I don't know where it ranks in terms of like popular sports in the UK. I know it's one of the most popular racket sports, but that doesn't say a lot because I think tennis so dominates the
Yeah.
space, and well, paddle now as well, which I guess is a kind of hybrid tennis squash
Yeah.
sort of thing. If you love paddle, you'll probably love squash. Um, a lot of similarities there. But it's such a fun sport to play, and I think in the UK it's so great because it's like an all-weather sport because you're inside, and it's tricky to rely on the outdoor paddle court at my work. I'm sure they get a hell of a lot of cancellations, but it's super fun. It's really beginner friendly. I've started running sessions for beginners at my local club in Hampshire, and they absolutely love it. I truly believe that if people try it, they'll really enjoy it. And I think there's a really nice element to, we have to remember that going to the gym as your activity is a really new thing. And like my parents will always say, like, that just was not a thing when I was growing up. Playing sport was a thing. It's so much more sociable and enjoyable. Obviously, it focuses on very different things. But if you want to move your body, have a bit of a laugh, get fit and healthy, then a sport like squash is just, well, any sport, but I'm a huge advocate for squash. It's just such a fun way of doing it.
And now getting that competitive element back as well. Now you can play, now you kind of have the confidence. Like, in my head, I've got this image of you, like, planting your leg and kinda looking at your knee and thinking, "Oh, is it gonna hold out? Is it?" And I'm sure that all those things have
It
run
was
through your
months of
head.
that.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, like, and even just stepping onto the court, like, I imagine that was quite a difficult thing to do with confidence for a while, and now doing it competitively again, looking back at those times, it must feel like almost 2 different lives.
Completely. I remember the first time I went back on court, I was like, I don't even know if I remember how to hit the ball,
Okay.
let alone like feeling confident enough. Squash was a lot of kind of lunging in to play a shot and then pushing off that same leg. I was like, how on earth am I ever going to feel like I'm at the point of being able to do that again? But this weekend, I was literally running around a court in Canterbury without a care in the world. And I have to say, I wasn't thinking once about injury. So it is crazy when I zoom out, um yeah, to really think about how far I've come. Like I was so annoyed at the weekend because I lost 3-1 to this girl that I thought I could have beaten, and I thought, if you told me a year ago that I was even going to be on this court doing this, I would have laughed in your face. So um yeah, just need to be grateful for where I'm at. But yeah, it does feel like a different world, a different world. Sorry.
It's identity again, though, I think, because that's something you can really fall into when it comes to, like we spoke about, if you throw everything into something, you kind of lose that thing, then you lose your identity. But I think sometimes it can become part of your identity when you're injured as well. And I
Mm.
think if you don't, at a point, just let go of that, which it sounds like you totally have now, like, you're back
Yeah.
competing, you're not thinking about it at all. It's part of your story, but it's not part of who you are, which for a while it was. I would
Yeah,
thought,
it's
like,
huge.
it was like, I'm injured. That's kind of who I am. And you're like,
Yeah.
then you're in that then, aren't you?
Yeah, completely. I think if I do those like Q&A boxes on my Instagram, I'll get some people that started following me through injury who are still going through injuries themselves. And a lot of people will reach out to me to ask about injury or for support on it. Which I've made clear I'm really open to, just because I felt when I was going through it, nobody was talking about injury on social media, apart from you'd get the odd like runner that was like, oh, I'm going to be out for a week and I'm really suffering with that. And I was like, try 3 years.
Yeah, yeah.
There was no one to turn to, but I'll get some people in those question boxes saying, so how are you now? How's your injury now? And I was like, I do need to remember to kind of occasionally come back to that, and because it is a huge part of my journey, and at the end of the day, the injury is how I've ended up getting to where I've got to on social media now and building up my business in the way that I have, because I never would have looked so much into exactly what to do to get in the best shape of your life, to get the healthiest you can be, whether it's through strength training and kind of physical changes like that, or whether it's through gut health and nutrition, had I not gone through the injury. So it's actually a really big part of my journey.
We'll finish with this, Annie, because I think it's going to be a lovely place to finish. But like we've spoken about kind of your whole journey, which has been amazing to kind of touch on everything. And it obviously was a very hard point in your life, but would you change it now because you're at this point where you're at? Would you go back and change it, or would you kind of just let everything happen as it's happened?
Someone asked me the same question the other day, and I'm almost at the point now of saying I'd go through it again if I knew it was going to get me to this place. But it took a long time, because I felt up until recently like it had kind of destroyed a lot of my late 20s. I felt like it had really stalled me, and there are a lot of things that I really struggle with. A huge one was, body confidence, because even I'd gone through quite a lot of physical changes going through injury because of lack of movement, like weight gain and things like that, not being happy with my skin, quite a lot of things. They'd left me in a place where I just wasn't very confident. I felt like I'd lost a lot of my personality. And would I go through that again? I probably would say yes at this point. But it took me a long time to be able to say that.
And I think that's important to note as well, just for anybody listening to this. It's like it takes time to learn lessons, and whatever you're
Yeah.
going through right now, it might feel like the end of the world. Like it might feel like the worst thing if it's injury or if it's something in your personal life or whatever. But like it's cliche to say this too shall pass, but I feel like it is a good message,
It's
and
so
it's
relevant.
yeah, it's so relevant, and also like again cliche, but like you will learn from the point that you're in, and like where you're at
You'll
now,
you'll be stronger because of it.
you wouldn't have grown in the way that you've grown and got to the place you've got to without that, would you?
Absolutely not. There's undoubtedly not. My path would have looked completely different. So I'm grateful for that. You learn a lot, and the mental resilience you gain from going through injury is huge.